Hello, welcome to the Park People Podcast. This is Rodney Oth, publisher of PRB Plus magazine. I am here today with Karen Fischer, an independent writer based in in New Mexico. She wrote an article for us titled Unknown Lands, which is going to be in the February issue. It's about a tallgrass prairie project that offers a new blueprint for conversation. It's an interesting read. We hope you get a chance to take a look at it. Karen, welcome. How are you today?
Hi, I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. Why don't you give us a quick overview of like the inspiration behind how this project came together? And I know it was a unique situation.
Sure. So I think the place to start is actually around 2019. I took a year off from working with my now husband, and we traveled throughout the United States, camping in different national parks and monuments. And that was the year when I first saw a bison in the wild, or quote unquote, the wild. I was in Custer State Park and it was snowing because, of course, we were in the middle of the Dakotas in the winter, even though it was April. And there was this bison. The babies had just been born, so there were these calves, and they're like cinnamon colored. And it was so magical to be, in my warm car, but look out and see a bison digging in the snow with their horns, and seeing them still in the quote unquote wild, even though it's the state park. Um, that being said, I had to go to a wedding a few weeks later, and I found out that my husband's family, who lives outside of Chicago, I found that they were in proximity to this bison refuge, which is the Midewin Tallgrass Prairie. And basically, this is a really curious project in the Midwest because I didn't even realize that when you're going through the Midwest, you're not really seeing prairie anymore. Like you're seeing the physical prairie, like the land itself, but you're not seeing the tall grass. Like we don't realize what we don't know that we don't know.
Yeah, right,
So
right.
it was a really great experience to be able to go visit this park, and you can stand on these bars where you could look out and see the bison herd, but they're so far away that you can't actually see them. But that's part of the restoration project, is they were introduced to help slowly but surely begin to restore this big swath of land in Illinois to what it was prior to European settlement.
And how big is it? Like I know it's big, but do you have any idea how many acres it is or what the overall size is?
So I could look up the exact number, but I do know that when the Joliet Arsenal, so this land in the 1940s, it was a TNT arsenal and supplied explosives during World War II.
Mhm.
So when parts of the land were annexed in the 1970s, what was annexed was some of the 23,000 acres of land. So is all 23,000 acres grassland prairie right now? I would have to double check, but that's what you're working with, is at least
Right.
a significant portion of that is for bison and just trying to cultivate and let the land almost heal from being raised.
Right. And how were there buildings and stuff that had to be taken down, or was a lot of it because it was a munitions space, just relatively vacant, or do you know how that process worked?
I don't know about the factory, I will say that, just to be clear, but there is a really unique element when you visit this area because there are these like World War II style bunkers. I don't know exactly what they stored in them. It must have been explosives,
Right.
but you can kind of walk in and see these like spray painted bunkers that are still there and almost slowly but surely becoming part of the overtaking of nature. Like they're aging in place, so to speak,
Right.
which adds a unique layer of history.
So it was some of this land was also farmed and agrarian, right? In
Yes.
addition to being part of the military. What was the impetus? Did you get any insight into the impetus to who decided that let's return this to grasslands? Why are we doing this? How did that come about? Like any of those details as far as the project, from a 30,000 foot view, did anybody give you any insight into that?
Yeah, I actually met one of the organizers who was really pivotal in that process. His name is Gerald Heinrich, and he is from right around Joliet, Illinois. So he always grew up in proximity to this arsenal. And in the 1970s, when they started to annex off portions, he thought to himself, like, wow, wouldn't it be really great to see this, what was a tall grass prairie, kind of devolve back to what it was before?
Hmm.
And he was a really central fulcrum of interacting with the various groups to help advocate for protecting the space as a tall grass prairie, A, and with bison eventually B. But in the 1990s, I believe it was about a dozen different civic groups were advocating to save this space. But
Hmm.
Jerry was one of those kind of Samaritans in the area that really looked at it and saw the possibility, and slowly but surely these different parties came on board.
Right, right, which is a big project, right? That's a big project. Getting all those parties, to move in the same direction, right? See the same vision. So he must have done a good job. What's let's talk a little bit about native species, right? So did they have to reintroduce native species? Do you know? Did they, if they just let it go, did the native species come back? What they have to do as they, was it as simple in your understanding as just letting nature take over and just leaving it alone, or did they have to do any kind of work along the way to kind of, mitigate what maybe we screwed up at some point and replace it with what might have been there originally?
One example I do have is invasive grasses and weeds,
Okay.
because there are things that are grown throughout this landscape that were not there and that will kind of take over, that, you know, crawl and grow, etc. I do know that reintroducing bison onto the land was very, very helpful because they could eat those invasive species or those invasive grasses and plants and kind of keep what is supposed to be there all there and intact. But it is a long-term struggle, I would say, to keep those specific types of grasses and species at bay, because it's just like if you're going to go weed your backyard or something in the middle of the summer, or you have a garden and there's just things that crop up that aren't
Right,
supposed to be there, but they find their way there. And thankfully, there is an animal, of course, that helps with it, but not every place has that, or that might be, further down the line in their vision.
right, right. Very good. Well, and I know that Heinrich, you mentioned in the article that he talks about, engaging younger audiences was part of the process and continues to be part of the process, passing it down. I know that obviously our younger generation has a lot of online stimuli. So getting them to pay attention to something above the screen, is always difficult. But how did that come together? I know he talked with you. I think he talked with you a little bit about strategies there.
So I know that the park has a good amount of programming that they use to kind of connect with different generations. And there's a lot of very rich educational materials when you get to the park to read about the history of it and these different epochs. And they have a lot of information that they offer online. So when it comes to children, I I keep coming back to this idea that we talked about a lot was, you have to kind of stimulate someone's imagination to like explain to them why this is important and like why
Yeah,
this is worth saving, even if you can't visualize it right now. So I'm going to be really curious to see in the next 10 to 20 years how people that or children that might have been exposed to this area and kind of took in this information in the past 20, 30 years may potentially become advocates for it.
right, right. What was as you were talking to him, was there anything that really jumped out that was kind of unique or neat? I mean, you've mentioned a ton of stuff. I mean, just, bison in the Midwest is a big one, right? Tall grass. It is crazy. Like, originally I'm from Wisconsin and Ohio, right? And, Ohio was all hardwoods. Like, and you drive around Ohio now and it's all farmland, right? Everything's been cut down, but it was just a massive, when that was the frontier, you couldn't hardly traverse across Ohio because it was so densely forested, right?
Mhm.
Wisconsin, Illinois, were the start of the grasslands, right? Indiana was kind of a little bit of mixed bag of both. And you mentioned, South Dakota, right? I'm in Idaho now, and
Mhm.
we haven't changed too much, which is probably good. But the idea is when you look at the different uh, geology, I guess, if and that's not quite the right word, but landscape that's changed over time. It's pretty dramatic. What jumped out at you, like when you wrote the story? Was there anything really cool that you're like, oh, I didn't know that before, or that's kind of a cool warm fuzzy that I can take forward. Anything like that that jumps to mind?
I mean, one of the statistics that immediately comes to mind, it's not really warm fuzzy, but it was the statistic that something like 0.05%, as in either half of a percent or 0.05%
Yeah,
of the current Midwestern prairie is tallgrass prairie. It is so little of it is conserved today. It's
right,
non-existent. It's not there. We have no idea what that actually looks like.
right.
And I, it kind of even captured my imagination, this whole idea of like, oh, I've lived in the Midwest. I lived in Chicago for 5 years. I went to the suburbs all the time. I took little trips
Right,
around Wisconsin or Michigan or whatever. But
right,
for being in this region, this is something I don't know what it is, and I can't really actually envision it. So if you like close your eyes and think about, if that land were to recultivate, it's actually up to like your hips, like the tall grass. Like it's
yeah,
pretty tall. And when you're walking in it, you don't really know where you're stepping. You might be stepping on like spiders or little critters, whatever.
right,
But it's just this kind of, it's this environment we've really lost. And
yeah.
I I hope in the future that there are more opportunities to be able to see it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's you can envision it a little bit, right? The whole westward tide, right? And they talk about, the wagon trains that went across there where, you know, for days and days and days, all that they would just walk through that tall grass, right? And so now to be 0.5% or 5%, whatever the number really is, is, you know, is incredible. So well, cool. What anything else that you learned from the article? Anything else that we should share with the readers that they might pick up in the article that would be of interest that we didn't touch on?
I think that the main thing that I've been thinking about a lot and doing some research and writing on too, or preparing to do a bigger project about, is the reintroduction of species and specifically places where you could reintroduce bison, for example. But it
Hmm.
also brings up these really interesting debates about reintroducing predators. Like throughout the West, Colorado reintroduced wolves. It's
Hmm.
very controversial. It's been controversial for a long time in the Yellowstone region, but it does make you wonder about this larger ecosystem of beings that were on these lands and kind of kept things in check, and what does it mean to care for land now. So
Right. Right. Yeah. Here in our little area, the wolves from Yellowstone. So that's eastern Idaho and western Wyoming, right, and parts of Montana. The we're starting to see them trickle. We're across the state from them, right? We're starting to see them in our area. Grizzly bears, they put some trackers on grizzlies. That's been very successful getting grizzlies back. Obviously, big in Yellowstone, big in that area. We're starting to see there's one that comes winging through our, from way out there all the way across the state every year, just wanders around and then ends up back there. So it's here for a few days, but they know that grizzly is here for a few days. So it is interesting. Um, it's fascinating, really, how little we know about the habits of these animals, what reintroduction may or may not mean, and what life, might have been like prior to, human interaction here. I mean, it must have been crazy.
yeah, it
Amazing.
must have been crazy. And it's it's just, I never get bored thinking about, what does it mean to support the environment or ecosystems, or to support farming and ranching, like all of these things. They are related, like they're all cousins to one another, but too often they kind of get pitted against one another, and it becomes this it can be really complicated. So this is a very interesting success story to me of they ultimately won. It was a dozen different environmental groups who were able to parse out this land that was not developed for houses and just becoming another suburb, but just to be marked and left untouched.
So is its official designation, I guess this is kind of like my last couple of questions here for you. Is this official designation like an open space, or is it considered a big park, or what do you know what they considered it in the end, like how they uh organized it, I guess, for lack of a better word. I'm not thinking very well today.
It's designated, well, it's officially called the Midewin National Tallgrass Prairie. So it's a national tallgrass prairie, and it's through the Forest Service / USDA. So when
Okay.
you go, there is kind of markers that are similar to when you go to a national park or monument. So
Okay.
wayfinding is sort of similar. I
Right.
think some of their funding obviously must come through that. But they
Okay.
also have a Friends organization. So Friends of Midewin is also helpful for
Right.
advocacy and publicity and
Right.
everything.
On an aside, when you were over in Custer, did you happen to get to Teddy Roosevelt National Park?
Teddy Roosevelt National Park with the
It is.
bison, correct? It's another bison park in North Dakota.
It's got bison, but it is crazy how you're coming across on the highway, right? And then there's just this crack in the ground, kind of a canyon, and that leads into this beautiful park that doesn't seem like it should even be there. It's like a different world. It is crazy. But yeah, I don't know if you've seen it or not. It's pretty cool.
I do remember it actually because something funny happened. So we were driving back from Chicago back out west. I think we were off to, gosh, we were either off to Glacier or yeah, I think we were going to Glacier.
Yeah, so
So
you'd go
on the
right through it.
route, yeah,
Yeah.
so on the route from Chicago to Glacier, we stopped at that park and we went and took a walk and a hike, and it's this really beautiful landscape where I remember it was a lot of, it wasn't like a canyon necessarily. It almost reminded me of Painted Desert in Arizona. It was just
Yeah.
kind of curious looking.
Right.
And when we walked back into the parking lot to go get back in our car, there was a bison just like wandering through the parking lot. And I was like, oh
Oh
my
yeah.
God, how
Yeah.
crazy. Like
That's
to see
crazy.
one
Yeah.
just hanging out with all the cars. So
Yeah, it is. Well, if you from what you learned, this is probably my last question for you. If there was any advocacy groups or people who are reading this that have have something they want to conserve, locally, right, wherever they happen to be, um, did you learn any best practices for putting it together? Did you learn any? You have any advice for how people might start the process?
I think what I kind of learned talking to Jerry, especially over time, because we still like email every so often, he lives very
Uh-huh.
close to my in-laws. I think I was just really struck by the idea of a couple of very passionate people can like lead the charge on these things. You always
Yeah.
think like someone else has to do it, it has to happen somewhere else, but like if you're actually invested in your community and you're really interested in its history and you're kind of settled and you want something to look a different way or be a different way, it's very much possible to be the one to, be the change you want to see, quote unquote. But like
Right.
this did indeed stem from a couple individuals that cared a lot and had this vision. So
Right. Right. Wonderful. Well, good. Well, great. Well, Karen, I appreciate your time. Thank you for helping us here and talking a little bit about the article. Thanks for writing the article. Um, any last thoughts? Any last words? Anything else? Anything we should have covered that we didn't?
I think we touched on everything. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, great. Well, hey, have a great rest of your week, and we'll look forward to reading the article in February.
Sounds good. Take
Okay.
care.
Thanks, Karen. See ya.